Before the pandemic even hit, I mean, I was talking about how the Federal Reserve had already caused the next financial crisis, the next economic crash, because of its response to the housing bubble, which was to do more of the same that caused the housing bubble and the financial crisis in the first place, only on an even greater scale.
Which is for the layperson listening, which is
creating money out of thin air, through so-called quantitative easing, money printing, essentially. And so the monetary inflation, when you are increasing the supply of currency, all else remaining the same, you're devaluing the currency. When you're increasing the amount of dollars chasing the same amount of goods, well, you're going to you're reducing the value of those dollars. And so the price inflation is just a natural consequence of monetary inflation. And classically, that is the definition of inflation. The definition of inflation classically isn't, well, a rise in prices. It was an increase in the money supply. That's inflation. And so that's what price inflation is, the consequence of monetary inflation. But the thing is they always talk about the CPI. And so before the housing bubble, you might remember they were saying, oh, look at the CPI, inflation isn't high, there's no inflation. But the thing is, well, look at the housing bubble. Look at the housing market. Well, that was inflation. Look at the stock market. That's inflation. So it doesn't necessarily show up, like the consumer price index, because the money doesn't go, it doesn't end up in our pockets first when it's newly printed. It goes to the financial class. And, the financial elites use that newly printed money to buy up assets.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't flow, into the CPI immediately. That takes time. And so, it shows up in, capital goods and in the housing market and the stock market, and it shows up there first. And so you see these bubbles, and the Federal Reserve has a policy. I mean, they're sustaining the stock market through inflation. I mean, they're literally, they wouldn't say it, they wouldn't put it in these terms, but they're blowing up a bubble. The same as that when their response to the collapse of the housing bubble was to try to reinflate the bubble. Yeah. They would never put it in those terms, but that was their intent. That's what they were doing. And they were successful at doing that over time. Because look at housing now. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah.
And so even before, coming back to the point, so even before the pandemic, I was saying, the Federal Reserve has already caused the next economic collapse. And then the pandemic hit, and they had policy decision to deliberately shut down the economy, which is something else entirely on top of it all. And so, yeah, I mean, of course, we're seeing these consequences. I mean, how could we not be seeing these consequences?